Michael had lived in Willow Creek for over 10 years, and during that time, he had built a life that, while simple, was full of meaning. His little neighborhood was quiet most of the time, filled with families who waved at each other in the mornings and children who played in the streets until sunset. Michael loved the peace, and he especially loved his old red pickup truck, which had been with him for almost 15 years. That truck was more than just a vehicle. It carried the memories of his late father teaching him how to drive, road trips to the mountains where they camped under the stars, and late-night drives to visit his best friend whenever life felt overwhelming. Every scratch and dent on the truck told a story, and Michael treated it with care, washing it every Sunday and keeping the interior spotless. It had become a part of him, a quiet companion that reminded him of the people he loved and the hard work he had put into his life. One Saturday morning, Michael stepped onto his porch with a steaming cup of coffee, ready to enjoy the calm before his weekend chores. The sun was shining, birds chirped from the trees lining his yard, and for a brief moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. But then he noticed a disturbance near the end of his driveway. Karen, the neighborhood HOA president, was standing there, waving her hands and talking to her teenage son. Michael frowned immediately, sensing something was off. Karen was known for her strict rules and for always finding ways to enforce them, sometimes more harshly than the community expected. She often inspected lawns, measured fences, and called residents over the smallest violations. Michael had always kept his property in perfect order, so he had never worried about her inspections before, but today felt different. Her gestures were sharp and demanding, and the way her son lingered near Michael's truck made his stomach tighten. Michael set down his coffee and walked closer to get a better view, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What is going on here?" he called out, his voice steady but firm. Karen spun around, her eyes narrowing as she caught sight of him. "Michael," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness, "you'll understand soon enough. My son needs your truck for a school project, and it's technically on HOA property." Michael's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, trying to understand the words he had just heard. "You want to take my truck?" he asked slowly, unable to hide the shock in his voice. Karen didn't answer immediately. She just smirked, as if expecting him to protest like a child. "Don't worry," she said finally. "I called the cops already. They'll come and explain everything. You just need to stay calm." Michael felt a wave of anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. He had faced difficult people before, but this was different. This was an attempt to take something that was rightfully his, something he had worked for all his life. He knew he couldn't just let it happen. He also realized that panicking wouldn't help. He had to be smart and measured if he wanted to protect his truck and his peace of mind. As he stepped closer, he noticed that Karen's son looked nervous, glancing between his mother and the truck, unsure whether to move forward or stay put. Michael understood the look. He had seen it in himself when he was a teenager, caught between wanting to please someone and knowing it was wrong. He decided to speak directly to the boy, hoping to appeal to his sense of fairness. "Hey, son," Michael said gently. "This truck belongs to me. You can't just take it. I know your mother has rules, but this is different. You don't have to be part of this." The boy looked at him, hesitating. Karen's smirk faltered, but she quickly covered it with a wave of her hand. "Ignore him," she said sharply. "Just do as I say. You'll thank me later." Michael's jaw tightened. He could see that Karen was confident in her power, relying on the fact that most neighbors would fear her or avoid confrontation. But Michael had always believed in standing up for what was right. He knew he wasn't alone in his convictions, there were people who would support fairness, and he was ready to call on every bit of help if necessary. The sound of approaching sirens interrupted his thoughts, and he realized that Karen's call to the police had been taken seriously. 2 officers arrived, uniformed and professional, and they quickly assessed the situation. Karen waved at them, explaining her side of the story, while Michael calmly stated the truth. "This is my property," he said. "No one has permission to take my truck. I have owned it for years, and I have all the papers to prove it." The officers listened, asked a few questions, and then told Karen that disputes over private property couldn't be resolved immediately without proper documentation. Michael's heart pounded with relief, but he knew this wasn't the end. Karen was clever and persistent, and he expected that she would try something else to get her way. He decided to take a precaution that few people in the neighborhood knew about. He reached for his phone and dialed his cousin Robert, who was the state attorney. Robert had helped Michael in the past with legal questions, and Michael trusted him implicitly. Speaking quietly, Michael explained the situation, making sure to provide all the details: Karen's attempts to seize his truck, the call to the police, and her son's involvement. Robert listened carefully and promised to send someone from his office to oversee the matter if it escalated. Michael hung up, feeling a sense of control return. He had faced threats before, some small, some larger, but this was personal. This was about protecting his hard work, his memories, and his right to live peacefully in the home he had built. As the morning went on, Michael didn't let the tension distract him from his usual routine. He watered his plants, mended a small section of his fence, and even waved to neighbors who walked by, keeping his composure as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside, he was preparing for the next steps. Karen had underestimated him, and he was ready to make sure she understood that her authority had limits. By the time the sun reached its peak in the sky, Michael's truck sat gleaming in the driveway, untouched and secure, while Karen and her son retreated for a moment, probably planning their next move. Michael watched them from his porch, sipping his now cooling coffee, and felt a quiet determination. This wasn't just about a truck anymore, it was about standing up, not just for himself, but for anyone in Willow Creek who might be bullied by someone who thought rules gave them unchecked power. The day stretched on, warm and calm, yet beneath the surface, Michael knew a storm was brewing. Karen wouldn't back down easily, but neither would he. And as the afternoon shadows lengthened across his yard, Michael realized something important: courage wasn't loud or aggressive, it was quiet, steady, and resolute. He was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that he had the law, his conscience, and his determination on his side, and that knowledge gave him strength far greater than any fear Karen could try to instill. Michael spent the rest of the morning watching Karen and her son from his porch, keeping a careful eye on every movement they made near his driveway. He could feel the tension rising like a storm about to break, but he forced himself to stay calm, knowing that anger would not help him. Karen paced back and forth, talking to her son in low, hurried tones, and Michael imagined the plans she was plotting to try and take his truck. He knew her personality well: she never gave up easily, and if she believed she could pressure someone into obeying her rules, she would try anything. Michael decided to take a small walk around his yard, pretending to water the plants and trim the bushes, but in reality, he was thinking through every possible scenario. What if Karen tried to block him from driving his truck? What if she called the cops again, claiming some new story to make him look guilty? Michael had to be prepared for anything, and the knowledge that he had already contacted his cousin Robert gave him a quiet sense of strength. Around midday, Michael noticed Karen moving closer to the truck again, gesturing with her hands as if she expected her son to start the engine. Michael's pulse quickened, and he knew it was time to act before things escalated further. He walked toward them, his steps slow but deliberate, making sure he looked calm yet confident. "Karen," he said, his voice steady, "this truck is mine, and no one has permission to use it. Please step away." Karen looked at him with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Michael," she said sharply, "you don't understand. My son has been assigned a project by his school, and the rules say that anything on HOA property can be borrowed if necessary. This truck is on HOA property, so technically it's fair game." Michael shook his head, his jaw tightening. "That is not true. This is private property, and you cannot take it. You may be the HOA president, but you cannot break the law or bully people into giving up what is theirs." Karen's son looked uncertain, glancing between his mother and Michael could see that the boy was beginning to question what he had been asked to do. He decided to speak directly to him again. "Listen," Michael said gently, "I know your mother wants you to do this, but it's not right. You don't have to be part of it. You can make your own choice and avoid getting into trouble." The boy hesitated, looking down at his shoes, and Michael could see the internal struggle. Karen's face grew red with frustration, and she waved her hands as if to silence Michael. "Ignore him," she snapped. "Just do as I say. You will thank me later." Michael stayed calm, understanding that Karen was relying on fear and authority to manipulate her son. He didn't respond. Instead, he focused on keeping everyone safe and preventing the situation from spiraling out of control. At that moment, the faint sound of approaching sirens grew louder, and Michael realized that someone in the neighborhood had called the police, perhaps seeing Karen's behavior as unusual. The officers arrived, and the tension in the air grew even stronger. Michael watched as Karen immediately approached them, trying to explain her side with a confident smile, but the officers remained professional and calm. They listened carefully as Michael calmly described the situation, stating that the truck was private property, that Karen had no legal authority to take it, and that her son had been pressured into participating. The officers asked questions politely, taking notes, and Michael noticed the subtle shift in Karen's demeanor. Her usual confidence was waning, replaced by worry and doubt. She tried to interject several times, but Michael remained steady, answering clearly and politely, ensuring that the truth was understood. After a few minutes, the officers spoke with Karen, explaining that they could not allow her to seize private property without proper authorization and that any future attempts could lead to serious consequences. Karen's son stood quietly beside her, still looking unsure, and Michael felt a small wave of relief. He had managed to stay calm and assertive, and it was already beginning to work in his favor. Even so, Michael knew that Karen was not someone who would give up easily. He decided to remain vigilant, keeping an eye on both of them as the morning turned into afternoon. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across Michael's yard, but he didn't relax. Instead, he used the time to think strategically. He cleaned the truck, wiped the windows, and made sure everything was in perfect order, not out of vanity, but as a way to demonstrate that the truck was his, cared for, and untouchable. Karen watched silently from the edge of the driveway, clearly frustrated that her plans had been interrupted. Michael noticed that her movements were becoming more hesitant, more calculated, as if she were trying to figure out her next move without revealing her uncertainty. He smiled faintly, knowing that patience and composure were his best tools. By mid-afternoon, Michael made a decision. He would not wait for Karen to make another attempt. he would take proactive steps to secure his property and ensure that no further intimidation could take place. He called his cousin Robert again, providing an update on the morning's events and asking for advice on next steps. Robert reassured him, telling him that the law was on his side and that officials from his office could monitor the situation if necessary. That knowledge gave Michael a quiet sense of power, not through aggression, but through preparedness. As the day went on, neighbors began to notice the unusual tension in the driveway. Some waved politely, others whispered to each other about what might be happening. Michael remained outwardly calm, chatting briefly with anyone who approached, but inside he was fully alert, ready for any challenge. Karen and her son eventually moved away from the truck, muttering complaints under their breath, but Michael knew better than to assume the conflict was over. He continued to watch carefully, knowing that patience, calmness, and preparation were his strongest allies. By evening, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, and Michael finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. The truck sat gleaming in the driveway, untouched, a silent victory for the day. Michael understood that the struggle was not over, but he also knew that he had taken the first and most important steps, staying calm, standing firm, and using the resources and knowledge he had wisely. The day had been long, tense, and challenging, but Michael felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had defended what was rightfully his without anger or rash action, and he had shown both Karen and her son that courage, intelligence, and integrity could overcome intimidation. And as he finally stepped back onto his porch, watching the evening settle over Willow Creek, Michael knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready. He was ready to protect his property, his peace, and the life he had built, no matter what Karen tried next. The next morning, Michael woke up early, feeling a mixture of determination and unease. Even though the previous day had ended with his truck safe, he knew that Karen would not let go easily. She was the type of person who believed that rules and authority gave her unlimited power, and he expected her to try something again. Michael got dressed, made himself a quick breakfast, and stepped outside to check his truck. It gleamed in the morning light, every surface polished and secure, and seeing it gave him a small sense of reassurance. As he sipped his coffee on the porch, he noticed movement at the edge of his property. Karen was there again, pacing with her son beside her, whispering urgently, as if trying to plan their next move. Michael didn't react immediately. Instead, he observed carefully, studying their expressions and body language. He could see frustration in Karen's face and hesitation in her son's, which told him that the first confrontation had already made an impact. Michael knew that patience and calmness were his strongest allies, so he decided to approach slowly, making sure he appeared calm yet confident. "Good morning," he called out in a neutral tone, "I see you're here again. Is everything okay?" Karen's eyes narrowed, but she forced a smile. "Michael," she said, "you don't understand. This is for my son. He really needs the truck, and I think you can help." Michael's stomach tightened, but he refused to show anger. "Karen, the truck is mine. I have every right to keep it, and I have already spoken to the police and my cousin. You cannot take it without permission. Your son does not need to be involved in something that is wrong." Karen's son looked down at his shoes, visibly uncomfortable, and Michael realized that he was starting to doubt his mother's plan. Michael walked closer, keeping his tone gentle but firm. "Listen," he said, "you don't have to do what your mother is asking. You can make your own choice and avoid trouble. You can still do the right thing." The boy glanced at him, then at his mother, hesitating. Karen's face grew red with frustration, and she waved her hands angrily, clearly feeling her control slipping. "Ignore him," she snapped. "Just do as I say." Michael remained calm, knowing that showing fear or anger would only make things worse. At that moment, a car pulled into the driveway. Michael recognized it immediately. It was an official vehicle from the state attorney's office, sent by his cousin Robert. Karen froze, her smirk disappearing, replaced by a look of uncertainty and worry. Two officials stepped out, professional and composed, and Michael felt a wave of relief. He had planned for this moment, and now he had the support he needed to ensure the situation did not escalate further. Karen tried to regain her confidence, waving at the officials and speaking quickly, but they listened politely, then turned their attention to Michael. "We've been informed about the situation," one of them said calmly. "Please explain what has happened." Michael recounted everything: the attempted seizure of his truck, Karen's insistence that her son take it, and the intimidation he had experienced. He spoke clearly and without emotion, letting the facts speak for themselves. Karen tried to interject several times, but the officials asked her to wait and provide documentation, making it clear that they were in charge. Karen's frustration grew, and Michael noticed her son shifting uneasily, finally understanding that what his mother was doing was not acceptable. The officials spoke quietly with Karen, explaining the legal implications of her actions and warning her that any further attempts to take private property could have serious consequences. The boy stood silently beside her, now visibly relieved that he was not being forced into wrongdoing. Michael watched everything carefully, feeling a mix of satisfaction and relief. He had stayed calm, acted wisely, and now the law itself was backing him up. Karen's authority in the neighborhood seemed to shrink in that moment, and Michael could see the realization in her eyes that intimidation and manipulation would not work here. By mid-afternoon, the officials left, assuring Michael that they would monitor the situation if necessary. Michael felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing he had protected his property and also helped a young person see the importance of doing the right thing. He returned to his porch, looking at his truck, and felt a renewed connection to it, not just as a vehicle, but as a symbol of resilience, patience, and careful planning. Karen and her son retreated to the edge of the neighborhood, muttering complaints, and Michael knew that while she might grumble or plan in the future, her power had been checked. He thought about the day, how it had begun with tension and fear, and ended with calm and resolution, all because he had remained composed, followed the law, and sought the right support. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across his yard, Michael reflected on the events and felt proud of the way he had handled everything. The truck, shining in the late light, reminded him of the importance of standing firm, remaining patient, and trusting in the truth. Michael understood that life in Willow Creek would continue, with its small challenges and occasional disputes, but he also knew that he had set a strong example not just for Karen's son, but for anyone who might witness that courage and calm can overcome intimidation. The evening air grew cooler, the birds quieted, and Michael finally allowed himself to sit back and breathe. The neighborhood seemed peaceful again, but he remained alert, ready for whatever came next. His truck sat safely in the driveway, every dent and scratch a testament to memories and hard work, and Michael knew that he had successfully defended more than just a vehicle. He had defended his peace, his rights, and the principle that fairness and honesty matter, even when someone powerful tries to bend the rules. And as the stars began to appear in the sky, Michael felt a quiet sense of strength and satisfaction, knowing that he was prepared for tomorrow, whatever it might bring, and that standing up for what is right was always worth the effort, no matter how difficult it might seem. The following day, Michael woke up with a sense of quiet determination, knowing that Karen would not easily give up her attempts to take his truck. The previous encounters had been tense but controlled, and he knew that the situation could escalate at any moment. As he stepped outside, the morning sun warmed his porch, but the sight of Karen lingering near the edge of his driveway immediately drew his attention. She was pacing back and forth, her son standing beside her with a nervous expression, clearly hesitant after yesterday's events. Michael understood that Karen was calculating her next move, and he knew he needed to remain calm and strategic. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the driveway, keeping a relaxed but confident posture. "Karen," he said gently, "I see you're here again. Is there something you want to discuss?" Karen turned sharply, her face a mixture of frustration and determination. "Michael, you don't understand. My son really needs the truck, and this is for an important school project." "It will only be for a short time," she said, trying to sound persuasive. Michael shook his head slowly, maintaining a calm voice. "Karen, I understand that your son has schoolwork, but this truck is my personal property. You cannot take it or use it without my permission. Yesterday's events showed that intimidation and pressure do not work here. Let's resolve this respectfully and within the law." Karen's son shifted uneasily, glancing between his mother and Michael, clearly unsure of what to do. Michael took a small step toward them, speaking directly to the boy. "You don't have to follow every instruction if it's wrong," he said gently. "You can make the right choice yourself. Nobody is forcing you to do this." The boy hesitated, and for the first time, Michael noticed a flicker of relief in his expression, as if he realized he had options. Karen's face grew red with frustration, and she waved her hands, trying to regain control of the situation. "Ignore him. Just do what I say," she shouted, but her voice lacked the confidence it usually carried. Michael remained calm, understanding that patience and consistency were his strongest allies. At that moment, a car slowly drove down the street, and Michael immediately recognized it. It was another vehicle from the state attorney's office, sent by his cousin Robert to monitor the situation. Karen's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of unease and worry. Two officials stepped out of the car, professional and composed, and Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had prepared for this moment, and now the law was visibly on his side. Karen attempted to approach the officials, speaking quickly and trying to maintain a confident demeanor, but they listened carefully, asking her to present documentation and clarifying that no private property could be seized without permission or legal authorization. Michael calmly explained the events of the past 2 days, detailing the attempts to pressure him and the harassment his truck had faced. He spoke clearly, without showing anger, letting the facts stand for themselves. The officials asked Karen to wait and then spoke privately with her, warning her about legal consequences if she continued to attempt to take Michael's truck. Michael noticed the shift in Karen's body language. Her usual assertiveness was replaced with uncertainty and doubt, and her son stood silently beside her, now looking relieved that he was no longer being forced into wrongdoing. With the law on his side and the situation fully documented, Michael felt a strong sense of empowerment. He had protected his property and his peace while also demonstrating fairness and calmness in the face of intimidation. As the afternoon wore on, Karen and her son retreated to the edge of the neighborhood, muttering complaints, while Michael returned to his usual routines. He polished his truck, checked the yard, and greeted neighbors who passed by, outwardly calm but fully alert. He knew Karen might still try subtle tactics or passive-aggressive moves, but he was ready to respond wisely, with patience, law, and strategy as his tools. The neighborhood, which had been quiet all morning, now seemed to notice the change in dynamics. Some neighbors waved and smiled, others whispered about the events they had witnessed. Michael realized that his actions had not only protected his property but also set an example for the community about courage, patience, and standing up for what is right. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the yard with golden light, Michael finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. The truck sat gleaming in the driveway, every scratch and dent a reminder of memories, hard work, and the resilience he had shown over the past days. He understood that life in Willow Creek would continue to have challenges, but he now felt confident in his ability to handle them. Karen's attempts to control or intimidate him had failed, and her son had learned an important lesson about honesty and integrity. Michael sat on his porch, taking slow, deep breaths, appreciating the calm evening while remaining vigilant. He knew the story was not over. People like Karen were persistent, but he also knew that staying composed, following the law, and protecting one's rights were far stronger than fear or intimidation. The sky darkened, stars appearing one by one, and Michael felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He had defended more than a truck, he had defended fairness, his peace of mind, and the principle that no one should use power to harm or manipulate others. The events of the day had been tense, but they had also strengthened his resolve and confidence. And as Willow Creek settled into the night, Michael felt ready for whatever challenges might come next, knowing that he could face them with courage, calmness, and wisdom, and that standing up for what is right would always be worth the effort, no matter how difficult the situation seemed. The following morning, Michael woke up with a calm determination, knowing that today could be the day everything finally settled. Karen had grown more cautious over the past few days, and Michael sensed that she was unsure how far she could push without facing consequences. He brewed a cup of coffee and stepped onto his porch, feeling the warm sun on his face as he scanned his driveway. The truck gleamed in the morning light, its red paint reflecting the sun, and Michael smiled softly. He knew that every scratch and dent on that truck carried a story, memories of hard work, family trips, and the lessons his father had taught him, and he would protect it no matter what. As he stepped down to check the driveway, he noticed Karen approaching, her son walking hesitantly behind her. Michael's heart remained steady, though he could feel the tension in the air. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Michael held up a hand, signaling that he wanted to start calmly. "Karen," he said gently, "we have been through this before. The truck is mine, and I have the right to keep it. There is no reason to escalate further. Let's talk respectfully and end this today." Karen's eyes narrowed, frustration and hesitation mixing in her expression. "Michael, my son really needs the truck." "I think you're being unfair," she said, trying to sound reasonable. Michael shook his head and took a step closer, speaking clearly and firmly. "Karen, I understand your concern for your son, but the truck is private property. You cannot take it without permission. Your son does not need to be involved in something wrong, and you should not pressure him to do so." The boy looked down, shifting nervously, and Michael could see the conflict in his eyes. He knelt slightly to meet the boy's gaze and spoke gently. "You have a choice. You can do the right thing and step back. Nobody is going to blame you for making the right decision." The boy hesitated for a long moment, then slowly nodded, relief washing over his face. Karen's frustration grew, but before she could respond, the familiar sound of tires on the street drew Michael's attention. A black SUV rolled into the driveway, and Michael recognized it immediately. The state attorney's office had sent additional officials, as his cousin Robert had promised. Karen froze, her confident demeanor faltering, while her son took a small step back, realizing the situation was serious. Two officials stepped out, professional and composed, and Michael felt a quiet wave of relief. They approached Karen, requesting that she provide documentation and reminding her that taking private property without permission could lead to serious legal consequences. Karen tried to speak quickly, but the officials listened patiently and then explained the rules, making it clear that she had no authority to claim Michael's truck. Michael calmly recounted the events, giving a clear and factual account of her previous attempts to pressure him and involve her son. The officials took careful notes and assured Michael that they would monitor the situation to prevent further incidents. Karen's son stood silently, now realizing that his mother had been asking him to act in a way that was unfair and wrong. Michael could see the change in him: relief, understanding, and a quiet sense of independence. The boy finally spoke, looking at his mother. "Mom, maybe we shouldn't do this," he said softly. Karen's face reddened, frustration visible, but there was also a flicker of acceptance, knowing that the law was on Michael's side and that her attempts to intimidate him had failed. By mid-afternoon, the officials left after ensuring that Karen understood the legal boundaries and that no further attempts would be tolerated. Michael returned to his porch, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. His truck remained safely in the driveway, every scratch and dent a testament to memories, hard work, and resilience. But more than that, he had protected his peace, his rights, and demonstrated courage in the face of intimidation. Karen and her son retreated from the neighborhood, quietly speaking among themselves, and Michael knew that this marked the end of their attempts to challenge him. He also knew that the boy had learned a valuable lesson about honesty, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what is right. As the evening approached, Michael reflected on the past few days. What had begun as a tense and stressful confrontation had ended with calm, fairness, and justice. He realized that courage was not about being loud or aggressive; it was about remaining steady, thinking clearly, and trusting the law and your own principles. Neighbors who had observed the events quietly came over to offer small words of encouragement, some expressing admiration for how Michael had handled the situation. He responded with simple thanks, but inside, he felt proud of himself, not just for protecting his truck, but for showing strength and integrity when it mattered most. The sky turned shades of pink and orange as the sun set, and the neighborhood settled into its usual quiet rhythm. Michael walked around his yard, checking the truck one last time, ensuring everything was in order. He could feel the cool evening breeze, hear the soft rustle of leaves, and smell the faint scent of flowers from nearby gardens. Sitting on his porch, he took a deep breath and smiled. The truck, shining under the evening sky, was more than just a vehicle; it was a symbol of patience, perseverance, and the ability to face challenges with calm determination. Michael knew that life in Willow Creek would continue with its small challenges and occasional conflicts, but he felt confident that he could handle whatever came next. He had learned the power of patience, the importance of remaining calm under pressure, and the value of standing up for what is right without anger or aggression. As the stars began to appear one by one, Michael felt a quiet sense of fulfillment and peace. He had defended his property, his values, and his personal dignity. Karen had been reminded that rules and authority do not give the right to harm others, and her son had witnessed a lesson in courage and integrity. Michael finally leaned back on his porch, the night cool and calm around him, and allowed himself to relax fully. The truck gleamed in the driveway, a testament to the hard work and memories it carried, and Michael knew that he had successfully stood up for himself, his principles, and what was right. And as Willow Creek settled into quiet darkness, Michael felt ready for any challenge that the future might bring, confident that with patience, courage, and honesty, he could face anything and protect the life he had built for himself.